Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading some true travel horror stories. I hope you enjoy them. I would also like to thank my good friend and brother in horror, Grimm's Library, for joining me on this episode. He will be reading the first story on this video. He has started a brand new YouTube channel called Are You Afraid?, where he's going to be doing his narrations going forward. That channel will be linked in the description down below. Make sure that you go check it out and subscribe so that you can hear future narrations from him. But anyways, now, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true scary stories.
I recently took my first ever trip out of the country and went to Peru. The travel advisory for the area warns of possible terrorism/crime. During the trip, several Peruvians told me it wasn't safe for women to walk alone, that it wasn't safe to use a cell phone in a car with an open window because it could be snatched, that saying no to a robber could get us killed, etc. The friend who invited me and myself spoke decent enough Spanish to get by, but someone speaking rapidly or switching from basic English to rapid Spanish like the man in the story was difficult to understand. We got off the plane in Lima at around 1 a.m. and headed outside to find our Uber. My friend and I are very different people. She acts like she has real-life plot armor, while I have PTSD and am a hypervigilant and extremely cautious person. When we stepped outside, a man started shouting at us in Spanish and aggressively gesturing to walk away from where we were standing. I don't know what my friend was thinking, but I thought maybe we were standing in the wrong area and that he worked at the airport. I quickly changed my mind as he had nothing on him that suggested he did, and he started snapping taxi at us when he heard us speak English. My friend explained in English and Spanish that we were waiting for our Uber driver, Berto, and the man frowned. He walked away. My friend stopped paying attention, but I noticed he went to a group of men for a huddle. I could make out aggressive snatches of Uber, Berto. One of the men broke away, dressed in a sort of suit, and rapidly approached. For this conversation and the rest of our interaction, he spoke snatches of English mixed with rapid Spanish. He basically started ushering us to the parking area and offered to take my friend's bag. I started objecting, and she mentioned that we were waiting for our Uber, and he insisted that it wasn't possible for Uber to come to the airport. He had to take us outside. For some reason, my friend rolled with what he had said and let him take her bag and lock it in the trunk. I kept pointing out that this didn't make sense and that we shouldn't get in with him. But she went for it, and I wasn't about to be alone in a foreign airport parking lot at 1 a.m. with no phone signal. Me being me, I took down his license plate before I got into the car and recorded much of the conversation. He kept the pretense of taking us to the driver and then started imitating he knew our driver, eventually calling him by name, and my friend forgot she told them earlier about it and bought it. But then he basically said he was taking us for the Uber instead of Berto, and to TLDR, the finer points of the broken conversation, he said he knew the address of our hostel, then insisted we tell him what it was. He asked for a fare of 40 sol, roughly 10 USD, and said he took card. Then started saying he was with the airport taxi company. He kept repeating he was with the airport and flashed a paper at us and said his name was Angel. Angel proceeded to tell us how dangerous Lima was and that we shouldn't be going there. We would be robbed, assaulted, etc. And he was especially aghast at what he called ladyboys. Then Angel started insisting he had to be paid 50 USD in cash, which I protested to and said it was different from what he had claimed. My friend, for some reason, decided otherwise, and after explaining she didn't have the cash on her, he zipped us to an ATM and demanded she got the money out. It was past 1 AM at this point. It was dark in an area that looked like a movie set for a high crime area. I had no signal and she barely had any. No one knew where we were or who we were with, and we didn't know if he was armed. I didn't want to get back into the car, but her suitcase was still in the trunk and we didn't have another ride. I'd heard stories about tourists in foreign countries being scammed in a similar way and being met with violence if they said no, or even if they agreed. My panic at this point was sky high. But she got the money, and he proceeded to drive us to our hostel, continuing his tirade about the dangers. We passed the young man on a stairwell who appeared to be wearing makeup, and the driver pointed and said something like, "See, ladyboy, not safe." That was the only nearly comical part of the whole situation. He seemed very agitated about the man wearing makeup, whereas I was very concerned about being robbed or murdered. He pulled up to what he claimed was our hostel, and to be honest, it looked completely deserted. Angel told us to just knock, and my friend asked if he'd wait to make sure we got in safe. He said okay, and then we headed to the door, only to find it was locked, dark, and not our hostel. Angel had by this point already gotten into his car and zipped away. So we were on the side of a dark street, having been clearly scammed in an area he emphasized was extremely dangerous for us, with no signal, no way to ask for help. Thankfully, our hostel ended up being pretty close, and we were able to walk to it and enter without any more issues.
So, I don't know if you will all view this as an overreaction on my part, but this really shook me up. Let me know what you think. Between August 2012 and June 2013, when I was 20 years old, my boyfriend Ryan was living abroad in Trieste, Italy as a teacher. We're both from New England, and I was unfortunately stuck at home for my junior year of college. 10 months is a long time to be in a long-distance relationship. So for Christmas, my parents told me I could go visit Ryan over his February holiday, which fell on his birthday and Valentine's Day. In short, it was perfect. When the time came, I sat at the airport, said a quick goodbye and happy birthday to Ryan via text, as I knew that I wouldn't have service on the flight, or at all in Europe. He wasn't able to meet me at the airport because of work, so he texted me directions about what to do when I land in Trieste. The directions went something like this. When you land, go out to the buses, get on the C bus and take it for about 45 minutes. At the end, you'll be at a train station, and I'll meet you there. It wouldn't hurt to get a map or ask someone from directions if they speak English, but if you follow my directions, you should have no problem. This all seemed pretty straightforward to me, but as I was sitting on the bus, I couldn't help but feel I had done something wrong. You know how it is, when you're helpless, you always assume the worst. and I was pretty helpless in a foreign country with little knowledge of the language and no traveling companion. So naturally, I was worried. I decided to try to communicate with the woman next to me, just to calm my nerves. Scusi, Inglés? Parle Inglés? She made a face and held up her fingers to show she spoke a little English. Oh, grazie. I'm looking for the train station. Stazione Treno? Dove? I pulled out the map I got at the airport and pointed to the train station on the map. She smiled immediately. Si, vengo con me, which I'm pretty sure means come with me. And even if it doesn't, she seemed to know where I wanted to go. And after viewing the map, how could she not? About 15 to 20 minutes into the ride, the bus stops in a really sketchy looking part of the city. The woman stood up and made a come here gesture with her hands. I looked around at the buildings outside and didn't see a train station anywhere. Ryan had been adamant that I wouldn't miss it, and I had only been on the train for half the time that he said I would be. Alarm bells started going off in my head. This woman was being so insistent, yet she knew exactly where I wanted to go because I had shown her the map and clearly this wasn't it. Then she grabbed my arm and tried to pull me out of my seat. I was not having any of this. I said no grazie, ciao, and waved goodbye. She looked really irritated, but she seemed to give up. I heard her mutter something I couldn't understand in Italian, and that's when 5 dudes stood up from all different parts of the bus and got off with her. The 6 of them were clearly together, yet she had sat next to me and had not talked once to any of them over the course of the 20-minute bus ride. I was more than a little creeped out, but I made it to my stop without any further incident about a half an hour later. I mentioned my experience to Ryan, and the 2 of us laughed it off jokingly that I could have ended up like the girl in Taken. I'm pretty sure I was just overreacting, but sometimes I really wonder. Italy, Trieste in particular, is known for human trafficking. A huge ring was just busted in May of this year. I feel like lonely, young foreign travelers are probably the easiest prey for them. And luring a young girl in with a woman and then using men to strong-arm her just doesn't seem so far out of the realm of possibility. Bad people or not, it was pretty scary for me, and I'm glad that I had enough sense to stay on the bus. Who knows where I'd be now? Hi guys, I'm a 20-year-old female, and this took place back in March. I was 19 years old at the time. It was the end of spring break and I was returning to Texas from California. I had just spent my vacation with my sister who lives in San Francisco. Every college kid counts down the days until spring break, and my vacation had gone rather well. However, I was slightly okay with returning to the essays and research papers, because I miss my friends, my bed, and my cat. Maybe not in that particular order. I was flying alone, something I don't like doing for multiple reasons, and I had only one layover in Dallas. I don't like traveling alone because I've had some bad experiences, and I happen to look a lot younger than 20. Most often, people say I look 13 or 14 at the most. I've always hated this about myself, but I'm told I'll be grateful when I'm older. As of now, it's just immensely frustrating. The last time I was on a plane by myself, the attendant thought that I was an unaccompanied minor named Taylor. I quickly assured her that I was not the minor in question. The time before that, I was asked to move away from the emergency exit, because you have to be at least 16 to sit there. Anyways, my boyfriend was picking me up from the airport and I was excited. I wore the pink members-only jacket he had bought for me and tried to look my best, which is difficult to do when traveling. When the plane arrived in Dallas, we had some really terrible weather and the turbulence was scary, but no matter. Soon I would be on another flight to Houston. I took the train around to the C terminal and made my way to the gate, only to find that due to torrential rain and lightning, my flight had been canceled. I was crushed, but determined, so I took my ticket to the exchange for a flight later. It seemed many others had the same grievance and were opting to do the same. As I was standing in line, a friendly-looking older man came up to stand behind me. "Are you alone?" he asked me. Everyone seemed to be conversing with one another, complaining about the weather and pondering about their options to get home. It didn't seem like a big deal, because strangers always seem to connect in situations like this one. We were all frustrated. I also felt safe in the crowded airport, so I answered him truthfully and continued to wait in line. The man behind the counter said I was in luck, that there were only 2 seats left on another flight to Houston, and that I could make it if I hurried. I rushed to board the train to the A terminal to catch my new flight, and upon reaching the gate was faced with the same situation. This new flight was canceled too. The man from before had followed me to the gate and was in the same boat. I exchanged my ticket for a later flight, and resolutely marched myself to the new gate only to be told the same as before. This happened literally 2 or 3 more times, because I didn't want to give up and really had no other options. The man shadowed me during the entire ordeal, and I didn't really find it strange. We were just 2 individuals stranded in an airport. The last gate I went to, I noticed he was still following me. He walks over to me and begins to chat about the awful luck we are having. Someone eavesdropping nearby suggests that I rent a car. I politely tell them that I'm not old enough. The man smiles and says to me, "Well, I'm old enough to rent a car. How about this? I'll rent us one. You can sleep and I'll drive." I look at him, and the way he is staring at me scares me. I finally begin to feel that something is off. I respond, no, but thank you. I'm going pretty far." His smile falters me for a moment. Then he suggests that he buy me some food. I'm starving. I am tempted. I hesitate for a moment, but then I remember a book I had read about a girl who was stolen from the airport after a man drugs her coffee. This gives me the strength to deny my grumbling stomach and decline him again. He follows me. I don't know why. He's already told me he is going to rent a car and leave. He points to a Mexican restaurant and says, "Oh, how about this place?" He has this strange look on his face and is standing far too close to me. I shake my head and say, "I told you, I'm really not hungry." Lie. Big lie. I can smell something delicious and I almost give in, but my face does not betray my hunger and I keep my pace. Okay, what about burgers then? He looks a bit annoyed. This guy does not give up easily. I ignore him. This causes him to glare at me angrily and then stalk away. I breathe a sigh of relief. I call my sister to tell her about him, not in a catty sort of way, just a "wow, that guy was persistent" kind of thing. I settle into a chair to think about my options. I feel pretty alone and worried. My latest ticket has me leaving around midnight, and it was about 9 p.m. at that point. I had been in the airport since 5 p.m. If this last flight didn't work out, I had no clue what I would do. I had no money for a hotel, and didn't fancy sleeping in a chair. The last time I fell asleep in public, on a train in France, a lady attempted to steal my backpack, but that's another story. I look up about 30 minutes later to see the same man walking towards me. I tuck my legs up in my chair nervously and pretend to play on my phone. "Hey there, still here?" he asks. He seems to have cooled down. I just stare at him. He clears his throat and tries again. "So I was thinking, you should come stay at my aunt's house with me for the night. That's where I'm staying tonight. It'd be no problem. You don't want to be in this airport all night all alone." I shake my head and say no, I'm fine, then turn my attention back to my phone. I didn't even make eye contact. I felt really uncomfortable. He tries to convince me and I have to say no firmly several more times. He looks angry. Really angry. His hands are clenched and his smile is obviously fake. It looks as if he will shatter his teeth if he clenches his jaw any tighter. I wonder myself, why hasn't he left the airport yet? Then I notice that his luggage is no longer with him. He was rolling it behind him and now he isn't. Where would he have put it if he hadn't left yet? And so much time has passed, why is he back here? As I'm thinking all of this, he is just standing there, staring. After what feels like forever, he storms off again. I feel so anxious because of him that I grab my things and move to a different gate to wait. My phone was dying, and I didn't want to be without it. So, to charge it, I had to plug it into the outlet in the floor. I curled up in the aisle between the chairs to wait. My sister called me about an hour later, and I was talking to her and telling her how creepy the dark weather outside looked. When I see him, again, walking around, glancing here and there in search of me. I hunched down even further, but my pink jacket was like a beacon. He locked eyes with me and I looked down. My sister said to stay on the phone, so I did. "Well, there you are," he says, not even acknowledging that I'm in the middle of a phone call. I continue talking to my sister when it becomes apparent that he isn't leaving, and doesn't care that I'm on the phone. I finally look up. "So you're still here? Look, you need to come with me. You can stay with me at my grandparents' tonight. They would love to have you. They won't mind me bringing you at all. Just come with me." I got chills. I don't know why, but something in his eyes told me that he was lying through those shiny white teeth of his. "You said you were staying with your aunt." His face dropped. It went from cool and collected to something else. Not even anger this time, and not defeat either. Almost like amusement. Something like the cat that ate the canary. He shrugs his shoulders like, "I tried." But we both recognize that he was caught in his lie. The entire time, my sister is saying hello repeatedly, but I was sort of shocked by how indifferent he was to catching me on him. I go back to my conversation and he says, "If you change your mind," and lets the final thought trail off while walking away backwards, eyes still on me. I call my boyfriend and tell him about each exchange, and he tells me to find a security guard to tell. I look around for one but couldn't find one. It was creepy because I've never seen an airport so deserted. I end up just deciding to move again and lay down between two different aisles out of view. A boy my age walks by and asks, "Why are you laying on the floor?" And I respond a tad aggressively with "Because I want to." He laughs and puts his hands up, the unspoken sign for "Whoa, take it easy." I apologize for my gruffness and tell him that a man was making me nervous. He jokingly says he'll protect me, and because he seems harmless and I mention my boyfriend, I converse with him for a while. He tells me he saw me and wondered why that blonde girl looked so sad. A while later, I'm thankful I did not brush this stranger off, because I see the man again walking around. We made eye contact, but he did not attempt to approach me because I was no longer alone. Maybe he was just some middle-aged man trying his luck at getting a girlfriend or something. But scaring someone isn't the way to do it. Even if he meant absolutely no harm, he was too aggressive and angry. Thank you for reading. My worst travel experience was in India in the mid-90s. I was staying in an average mid-budget hotel in Goa, India. Went out for the night. Bumped into a couple of lads from Birmingham earlier in the night and went back to my hotel about midnight. Next to my hotel was a small lean-to type of food shack, for want of a better description. I called in for a last drink before bed, and I was surprised to see two Birmingham chaps from earlier. "What brought you here?" I asked. "Dunno. The taxi driver recommended it to us," they said. Anyway, there was only the three of us in there, and suddenly I was aware of another person on a table sat by himself who I hadn't seen come in. I introduced myself and asked him what his name was. "They call me the doctor," he replied. Oh crap, we've got some dodgy fantasist, I thought. "I'll go on then, indulge me. Why do they call you the doctor?" "Because I sought people out from bad trips." Me, being puzzled and looking around, couldn't see any beneficiary of his special skills, so I asked him who he was sorting. He gestured at the waiter, a Jamaican guy who had served us and seemed pretty normal and healthy to me. So I thought he was just some Walter Mitty type character, but it didn't matter to me as I was off to bed in a minute. He rolls a joint in front of me and invites me and the two Birmingham guys to take some. I think I've only tried one once or twice in my life, so I declined. He's quite persistent, so I think, oh, what the heck? What harm can 2 or 3 draws do to me? I take about 3 draws, along with the 2 Birmingham lads, who, by this time, are all sitting at the same table. Within 60 seconds, my brain has gone to mush, and my eyes are spinning like saucers. My last abiding memory in the restaurant is this guy looking into my eyes, wagging his index finger at me and saying, "That's why they call me the doctor." My mind's gone to crap. I don't know if I'm or the other two guys are being set up to be robbed or worse, and I realize I've only got seconds to act. "I'm just going for a pee," I managed to utter before staggering out of the place, my legs like Bambi on ice and stumbling into my hotel just yards away. I lay awake from midnight until 6 a.m. hallucinating. I've never taken acid before, but that's what I imagine it would be like. I never met the two Birmingham guys again, so I don't know what transpired after I left. So, let's not meet again, Walter Mitty. And strangely, I don't believe you're a real doctor. This is a reminder to solo travelers everywhere. This happened to me. It was terrifying. And I'm lucky that nothing worse happened. I'm a heavily tattooed woman, and I often like to travel to get pieces. I'll make a whole trip of it. It's like collecting memories that you'll have forever. With that being said, I booked a trip from Vancouver, Canada to LA for a piece. I was going to be spending 4 days there with my girlfriend. But because my apartment was scheduled for all Friday, my girlfriend didn't want to miss a whole day of work while I'm in the studio all day. So we agreed that I would go Thursday night, get my tattoo Friday, and then meet up with her Friday night at our Airbnb. Unfortunately, I arrived at LAX around 11 p.m. It was dark. I was alone in a city that I had only been in once before, when I was 12. I followed the map that she wrote me to try and find the taxi area. Eventually, I walk up to a spot where I see two taxi drivers standing, and one of them asks me if I need a ride. I say yes, put my bag in the taxi, give him the address, and away we go. It takes about 2 seconds for this normal guy to get creepy. I can see him staring at me through the rearview mirror as he's asking me questions like, "What are you here for? Are you alone? Are you Russian? Are you sure you're not? I'd really like to take you out for some Russian food. You're really not Russian? I'd like to take you out." Nope, no thanks, and no I'm not. We get to the Airbnb and I say thanks, and I go to get out and he says, "I need to make sure that you get in safe." I said that's not necessary. He insists. It's past midnight by this point. No one's around. I'm in a quiet residential area and he's persistent. I walk up to the apartment door and there's a lockbox that I need to get the key from. This man was clearly hoping that it would not unlock the door, because as I'm typing the code into the unlock it, he's repeating the numbers back out loud. 9631. It opens, and I grab the keys inside and go, "All right, thanks, I'm good now." He says, "No, I need to make sure that you get all the way in." I'm panicking now. He follows me to the apartment door, which happens to be on the first floor, of course. Now he knows what unit I'm in. I open the door and slide in. I told him that my big buff boyfriend was waiting for me at this place. I'm gay. I am the big buff man. And he sees that no one else is in there. I say thanks and go to close the door. He puts his foot in the door so I can't close it and goes, "What? I don't get a hug?" I just wanted this man to leave, so I gave him a quick hug, pushed him away, and slammed the door. I slept with a knife by my bed and had to make sure that all the windows were locked. By the way, ladies, if a man is asking if you're Russian, what he's really asking is if you're a worker. I found that out later. I am so incredibly lucky that nothing else happened. I was really shaken up though, and I barely slept. I was on a work trip to Portsmouth, New Hampshire a couple years ago. The day I arrived, I asked the employees at the job site what's good there. What do I need to eat? Where are the bars at? I like to go out to dive bars and whatnot when I'm someplace new, and just kind of pretend like I lived there for a while. So I'm asking about downtown and music venues and all of that, and they tell me not to go downtown alone because there's a serial killer that's killing men. I'm not a common serial killer demographic. I'm a stocky white dude with lots of visible tattoos. I wouldn't say that I'm intimidating, but there aren't that many places that I travel that I can't blend in to some degree. So I laugh it off and obviously go downtown alone immediately after work. So I'm wandering around, popping into bars for a drink at a time. In this small but promising downtown that feels old and kind of expensive, but also artsy in a New England coast town away. Long story short, I'm kind of bummed. Nothing's really going on, and I can't find a good patio to simultaneously drink and smoke on, which is my number one criteria for a pub always. So I'm about to call it a night, but I lean up against a wall outside of a bar to have a cigarette and decide if I want to go in or call it a night. And some dude walks out and lights one of his own and starts talking to me. Now at this point I've had a couple. Not a lot, but nobody I've spoken to really has a notion of anything cool happening that night, and a substantial part of me wants to see what this town has to offer and give it a go. So we start talking about punk and live music and what's going on, and he's super enthusiastic to show a traveler some spots. Of course, the whole time in the back of my mind are the comments about the serial killer. But whatever, he's smaller than me. I have a knife and a decent tolerance for alcohol, so it's worth the risk. He takes me to like 4 bars, a couple of which we have a drink at and feel out if it's worth hanging or not. The town's cool. He makes good conversation, but I'm definitely holding my drink as far away from him as I can. It's weird. I feel like I can only imagine women feel like every day, but I don't have a solid reason to break off the hang yet, and he's honestly putting forth a lot of effort to show me the spots, which is super cool and even more rare, so I don't want to crap all over it. But the whole night he keeps trying to get me to go to this one bar. I don't even remember the name, but it was high school themed, and he thought that that was really cool, which seriously unsettled me. Also, he kept asking me where I was staying, and I kept making up hotel names because it felt weird, but he kept calling me on it, until I finally said something about the Roundabout, which was the name of a hotel and diner right next door to mine. When he made this connection, he lit up, sort of, like with satisfaction of solving a puzzle. So we go to the high school bar. He'd been to all the other ones. There wasn't anything going on anywhere, and it was right there. They actually had a rad solo act playing covers that I loved. So we're hanging, and I'm still stiff-arming my drinks. And then I realize it's been way over the 2 hours that I put on my meter. I gotta move my car or leave. But the night is just now getting good. People are showing up and there's music that I know and love. The high school bar has legitimately been the best bar so far. It was weird. And dude tells me that I can park on the street where there's plenty of spots, since it's after whatever time it needed to be. Cool. I'll be right back, I say. But he's like, no, I'll come with you. And that's weird, but all right, whatever, dude, let's go. So I tab out, and my bill is way more than it should be. And I realize that he's putting beers on my tab without asking. So I tell the bartender to move that stuff to his. And we have a weird moment, but it passes. And we leave to move my car and hit the next spot. So he watches me move my car. Comments on the plates, since they didn't belong to the state that I told him I was from. And I told him it was a rental. We moved on to the karaoke bar. That's okay, where he tells me he's a high school janitor and that he'd invite me to sleep at his place, but it's just a small studio apartment. He asks for my phone number. I play it off and say that I appreciate the friendship for that night, but I don't give out my phone number like that. We smoke weed in an alley with a guy who looks like Sam Elliott from The Big Lebowski. It was weird, but all right. I go back to the hotel and go to sleep, feeling somewhat fulfilled in my experience in that town. The next morning I go to the job site and everything's fine for a while. And then my phone rings with a local area code and it's the hotel. Apparently the hotel caught fire and I need to come collect my belongings since my room was in an affected area. Holy cow. That's weird. Okay, I'll be back in a bit, I guess. I get to the hotel and it's surreal. Half the building had sprinklers going off. It feels like a war zone almost. The smell of burnt carpet and everything is pervasive. Everyone's weirded out. Apparently it was arson. Started from outside of the building, 3 feet in front of where my car was parked that night before. Nothing caught on camera, but substantial damage to the building. I can't prove to you that I met a serial killer and that he burnt down my hotel as a vindictive act born of rejection. But I can tell you that dude had major Dahmer vibes, and my hotel was 100% set aflame. Also, the suspected victims look a lot like me. I don't know, maybe it's bullcrap. But man, was that a work trip. P.S. The hotel transferred me to the Roundabout Hotel, right next door. When I got there, they gave me a voucher for 10% off breakfast at the Roundabout Diner, conveniently located downstairs. At that diner, I had the best hot sauce I've ever had in my life. I bought a bottle there, and I've been hooked ever since. Hoff's wake-up call. It's got coffee in it. I got kidnapped in Bucharest, Romania within 5 minutes of arriving. I arrived around 5 a.m. in the morning, got off the train, was warned before I went not to use the ATMs in the train station, so I left to go find an ATM on the streets. As I stepped out, some guy came up and started talking to me in English, which was already kind of weird to begin with. As I kept walking, a taxi pulls up next to me, and I just felt the man's arms grab around my shoulders and throw me into the back of the taxi. He got in the front and the driver took off. They kept asking me questions like where I was from and what I was doing there. I told them that I was from China on an exchange. I'm actually from Canada, but Canadian passports are worth a lot apparently on the black market, and I tried to play it off like I was in a taxi and asked to be taken downtown. They were silent with me for the rest of the time, and we ended up at some random ATM. They dragged me out and made me take money out, before leaving me there and driving off with my cash, wallet, ATM card, and my bag. I ended up walking about an hour and a half to get to the downtown area. You can see the People's Palace from really far distance away, and it's very central. And it took another half hour to find my hostel. The people at the hostel were super nice and helped me get back on my feet, let me stay for free, and gave me some food before I could file a police report and get insurance to help cover my losses. Charles de Gaulle Airport, Paris, France, 2009. While waiting for my flight, I went to the men's room. I had to bring my bags and stuff with me as I was traveling alone. I was in there for not even a few minutes, using a urinal, when a flash mob of maybe 8 kids suddenly come in. They quickly descended on my bags. A few grabbed small shopping bags full of things I'd bought to give as gifts and ran. I quickly aborted my activity, zipped up and lunged for my bags. There were too many, and some escaped before I could do anything. One kid had gotten my laptop bag, but I grabbed the strap. As if well rehearsed, he spun around with a knife, cut the strap in one quick swoop, and started running. I didn't care that he had a knife. Dropping the strap fragment in my hand, I quickly grabbed at the bag while kicking the kid in the butt with my foot as hard as possibly could. The kid cried out in agony and ran off. I spun around and saw the other kid had a knife out, separating the zipper for quick access to my larger luggage. I caught his eye, and his face contorted into this angry snarl as if he was possessed, and he started yelling some French obscenities at me. 2 other kids jumped me from behind, trying to get my laptop bag. One was the kid that I'd kicked, and he had his knife out. I let out a furious rage of a yell, snarling at these kids, and quickly slipped off my belt to use as a whip on them. A man came into the restroom, looked at what was going on, looked at me and started to turn. La police, s'il vous plaît, monsieur, I shouted. He turned and looked at me again, frowned, then left. I had a feeling he wasn't going to get involved. I still had my laptop bag in hand. The kid I'd kicked ran off, and the other kid who was with him just shuffled back a bit, looking like he was going to size up my altercation with the kid rifling through my large luggage to see if he might have a chance to get something. While the kid on my luggage was feverishly looking through my luggage, the flap now undone, I kicked him really hard in the small of his back. He cried out loudly in pain. I must have heard him because he had one hand holding firmly onto where I kicked him. I threatened to kick him once more and he took off, whimpering. The other kid started to leave when the door opened and another one of those delinquents had returned to see what progress was made. I still had my belt in hand and raised my arm at him. He ducked out. You better tell your friends to return my stuff, I shouted at the one kid remaining. He cursed at me and left. I got my stuff together and went to a police station in the airport to report the crime. The officer I dealt with looked at me with disdain and a total I have better things to do face. I described what happened. He then shoved a clipboard in front of me, handed over a pen and said fill it out with a heavy accent. I asked about the chances of getting my stuff back. I was told that there was pretty much no chance at all. Another officer there handed me some kind of strap thing and said that I can use that to bind up my bag, since it'll be checked in. Well, I realized I didn't have time for filling out a form that would do me no good, so I secured my large bag and left. Later, I told the friend that I had visited what happened, and he said, I thought you knew. There are vicious pickpockets and petty thieves in the CDG airport. Never go to the men's room there. Just wait for the one on the plane. I was flying from Krabi, Thailand to Denver. It involved 3 connections: Krabi to Bangkok, Bangkok to Tokyo, and Tokyo to Seattle. There were long layovers, including a 13-hour overnight one in Bangkok. I have chronic incurable insomnia. I've been on sleeping pills for almost 20 years, and I cannot sleep on airplanes, no matter how drugged up I am. All in all, it took 52 hours to get from Thailand to my house. I slept for maybe 45 minutes in that time, in 5 to 10 minute spurts. I started hallucinating from sleep deprivation on the way back from Seattle. Nothing scary, just kept seeing divider curtains on the plane that weren't there, thinking a flight attendant was behind me when nobody was nearby. By the time I landed, I was seeing light visual patterns like the kind people see when they take a small dose of acid. Just knowing my brain was slowly ceasing its normal function was really scary. I was terrified that when I got home, I still wouldn't be able to sleep and it would get worse. Being awake for over 2 days straight was a really terrible travel experience. Not me, but a friend of mine encountered some crazy stuff while traveling in Taiwan. This was around Taichung. There were 4 of them, her with 2 other girls and 1 guy. Hopped in a taxi and gave the driver the destination. He goes the right way for a while, then abruptly pulls off into a side road. Still driving along, my friend asks him in Mandarin where the heck he's going. Since they've been to this place before and they know wherever they're going is now not where they asked for. The driver says nothing, gets on his cell phone and speaks to someone on the other end in Taiwanese. No one in the car understood this language. The mystery was how the driver figured this out, since they were all Asian and could have easily passed for natives visiting home for the holidays. The car pulls into an open field, surrounded by trees in every direction, with only a single house in the middle of it. He parks right outside, and it appears people were merging from the building. Several of them. The driver pauses for a brief second, starts the car up again and commences driving along. A few minutes later, the group find themselves on the side of the main road as the cabbie drives off. What the three girls in the back of the car did not know at the time was that upon stopping outside that house, their fourth member sitting up front pulled out his knife and held it right above his knee, making sure that it was in plain view of the driver. Once the cabbie saw this, he started the car up again, no doubt realizing the dangerous situation he had inadvertently found himself in. They never figured out what the driver planned on doing, but anything even close to kidnapping couldn't have been good. The cabbie was reported to the authorities, but they left for the States before finding out anything further. When I was in Indonesia, I was walking from my guest house to grab some dinner one night, and a group of 4 men started catcalling and yelling what were probably inappropriate things at me. I just ignored them and walked very quickly into the nearest building, which was a department store type place. They followed me in, and I was trying to just ignore them, hoping that they'd leave. I figured I was safer in a public, well-lit sort of place. They grabbed me, and I spun around and started screaming at them in English, so they probably didn't understand, but I reckon that they got the feeling. They laughed, but eventually left. The worst part was all the people in the department store, including other women who were working there, just giggled when they saw this happening. These men probably could have just dragged me out of the store, and no one would have done anything. I left Indonesia the next morning. In the Yucatan, southern Mexico, my brothers and I told a local in a bar we were looking for moda. We were in some super small town where everyone gets home at 4 from work, gets loaded, and is passed out by 8. This character says he'll take us to the town dealer, and since we were drunk, decided to go along. This isn't your friendly suburban stoner who slings baggies out of his parents' garage. This was some next level narco stuff. With rooster fighting in cages outside, a tall gate, and razor wire all around the house, which by town standards was a mansion. But by American standards, it was a big 30-year-old house that wasn't maintained. My drunkest brother decides to go for it, while we wait outside. In a few minutes, I hear laughing, and he's being the life of the party, acting like the jolly drunk, American speaking Spanglish. He was in there half an hour, but since we didn't hear any bad sounds like yelling and fighting, it was okay. He gets escorted out and says drunken goodbyes, and pulls us along back to the bar by our pension. He tells us that was the most scared he'd ever been. There were 2 dudes with machine guns that he could see, and he was sat down in front of some bigwig with gold teeth. It was like a movie set, and he wouldn't have been surprised if there was a tiger in the basement to eat people. This area is known for kidnapping tourists, as well as hanging the headless bodies of competitors and law enforcement from bridges. He didn't realize how bad it was until he got in and saw that he was interrupting some kind of party. Everyone was pretty messed up though, and he just tried to be goofy and amazed at all their stuff, so they'd like him. They wanted him to party, but he said his brothers were waiting, and he had to bring us a little weed or we'd worry. He used the language barrier to leave against their request to stay, and do God knows what. Sober us realized the next day that it could have turned out terrible, and the weed wasn't even very good. I was living in Nepal during the highly suspect massacre of the royal family. I was stuck in my house for 3 days, listening to some serious rioting going on outside. Someone set a bridge near my house on fire. The boredom got me in the end, and I booked a bus ticket to the other end of the country. I had to ride my bike through a hail of bricks to get the bus stop pickup point. and I enjoyed a relatively quiet and uneventful 10-hour bus journey. I walked the Himalayas, ate lots of dal bhat, got giardia, saw some wonderful mountains. When I returned, Kathmandu was back to normal. Everyone was rather nonchalant about the whole thing. All the men had shaved heads and it was all back to normal. The change was really rather eerie. It was like nothing happened. Apart from my bike, it had 7 shades of crap kicked out of it by the rioters. Poor bike. I traveled to Paris when I was 17 with a group of students from my school. We were told to keep our money packed away safe and to never talk to the street vendors, especially those who were making bracelets on tourists' wrists. These men make bracelets and then charge exorbitant fees, and if you don't pay them what they ask, they will threaten you or physically stop you from leaving the area. I was paired with another young girl when we were traveling to the Sacré-Cœur, and a man approached us wanting to make a bracelet for us. We declined, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept bothering us and following us up the hill while we were still saying no. At one point, he grabs my wrist and starts trying to work. I grab onto my friend and he's pulling me into the other direction. He starts screaming at me and pulling me harder, and I'm not sure what to do at that point. My friend starts screaming for the police and he took off. Unfortunately, the same thing happened to one of our other students, who didn't understand that the man was not going to let him leave without paying 20 euros. The student tried to leave, but the man was threatening to follow him and kill him, kill his family, and do all sorts of terrible things. The student took a picture of the man, and the man snatched his camera and took off. Tourist destinations are crazy. In 2005, a couple friends and I went to Tijuana, Mexico for a day of shopping and cheap tequila. I got lost trying to find my way back to the border and ended up in a crappier area of town. A cop car pulls me over and out gets 4 men, not in police uniforms and carrying large rifle machine gun looking things. All 4 of us girls are trying not to lose our crap when they just start screaming at us in Spanish. They're yelling for us to get out of the car, but we weren't moving fast enough for them. They rip the doors open, pull us out, push us to our knees on the side of the road, and start digging through our car. We all thought we were going to die that night. They just stole everything worth anything from our car and then hightailed it out of there. We were very, very lucky to have left with our lives. During university, I went on an education-sponsored trip to Singapore. Everything was amazing until the last night that we were there. We went to a club that was a bit of a trek from the hotel. I ended up being way too sober to continue partying, so I hightailed it back to the hotel with my boyfriend. Everyone else stayed behind, but eventually split up at last call to catch cabs and such. A guy and a girl from our group decided in their drunken stupor to walk back from the hotel. They somehow, in some weird way, ended up wandering into the Singapore port. Keep in mind, the port is the livelihood of Singapore. They didn't even realize it until a port authority car pulled up to them and told them that they'd give them a ride back to their hotel. They were friendly about it, so they hopped in. What happened next was insane. I get a call to my room at 4 a.m., and someone in very broken English is asking if I know these 2 people. I was sharing a room with the girl. First, I thought that it was a prank by a friend, but then I freaked out when I started asking if they're okay, and this really eerie laugh was heard on the other end. They wouldn't give me their name or location. That gut-dropping feeling when you realize it's not a joke and something is seriously up. Turns out the port authority arrested them, turned them over to their version of the state police, and were accusing them of being spies who had scaled the wall of the port to gain intel on trade. Both of them were separated, interrogated, Guns were pulled on them in order to get them to fess up. They were taken to the walls of the port and forced to explain how they scaled them. One cop told one friend that the other guy had already confessed, so they might as well turn themselves in too. These people were totally crap-faced when I left them a few hours before. I could only imagine the sobering fear. It took the rest of the group and the hotel front desk staff hours of calling to finally locate where they were being held in the city. Luckily, we met a super successful businessman/lawyer living in Singapore, but from our hometown a few days before. We called him up and asked if he could help us. He went to work on it. 12 hours later, with the threat of our government getting involved in the mess, they finally turned our friends over to us. We got out of there pronto. We think someone messed up their job at the port that day, left a gate opened, and rather than admit fault, they would get these young students to take the fall. Thankfully, neither of them gave up, because God knows how insane their punishments are over there. Moral of the story? Take a cab. My older sister and I were traveling together all through East Asia last year. We were in Laos and wanted to find the fastest way to meet up with a couple of friends who were in Vietnam. We decided to hire a private driver to take us there. The driver explained that he could only drop us off at the Laos/Vietnam border and that there would be tourist buses at the border that could take us into the city. When we arrived at the border, we got out of the car and the driver drove off. My sister and I walked up to the window of the only person working, got our visas, and walked across. Immediately, we noticed there were no buses, no hotels or shops, and no people around. It was 5:30, and the sun was about to go down. All of a sudden, we see a group of men approaching us on motorbikes. They surround us in a circle, and one of them says in broken English, "Where are you going? Need ride?" My sister and I looked at each other and realized that we have no other way of getting into the city. We tell the man where we want to go, and he tells us the city is only 15 minutes away and that it would only cost us $12 to take us there. This all sounds great, except when he mentions that my sister and I would have to get on separate bikes. We decline his offer, unsure of how else we'll get into the city. We start trying to walk away, but the bikers try grabbing our arms and following us. They try to haggle and convince us to get on their bikes. We see a garage door open a few yards away, and we head towards it. An older couple is watching television inside, and we ask them for help. The bikers had followed us there and started shouting at them in Vietnamese. The couple looks at us in confusion, and my sister and I realize they were probably trying to somehow persuade them to not help us. My sister then looks at the couple and says, $70 drive to city, and points at the car sitting in the garage. The older lady shakes her head in agreement and then looks at the bikers and shouts something to them in Vietnamese. The bikers try to convince us one more time to get on their bikes and start laughing. They finally realize there was no convincing us and they leave. We get in the car with the older couple and they start driving to the city. The scariest part is that it took over an hour and a half to get there when the bikers said only 15 minutes. Just thinking what could have happened to us if we got on those bikes gives me the chills. This isn't terribly scary or intense. More of a, I wonder what that was and what would have happened scenario. When I was 18, I traveled to Ireland with two of my girlfriends and one of their younger sisters. We are from Canada. My one friend, both of her parents are from Ireland, and so we were staying with a variety of grandparents, cousins, etc. One day we were dropped off in Belfast and told where to meet the family member, I don't remember who, at a specific time and place so we could sightsee on our own and do a little shopping. We were in a very busy shopping and tourist area, tons of people around. As we were walking around, this young guy in his early 20s walks up to us with a clipboard and asks if we would like to participate in a survey. Being young girls, a cute Irish guy talking to us turned us into idiots, as he was asking questions about what we thought about the shopping district, what we like to spend our money on. I was watching the guy write down the answers. First of all, his clipboard had only a blank piece of paper with no listed questions. And secondly, I watched him sloppily kinda write down my friend's answers. I've always had amazing intuition, and something didn't feel quite right to me. I thought we were in a busy place with tons of people. A cute guy is talking to us. I'm just gonna see where this goes. I was also the less sheltered one of the group, and was definitely suspicious. He tells us that we were randomly picked to come back to the office, that we've won a prize, so he wants us to come with him. He walks very quickly through the crowd and keeps trying to get us to move faster. I quickly say to the other girls that something feels odd and to be careful. He leads us into a rundown building, and there's a huge staircase. It's dirty and there's garbage all over the floor. Remember, this is in the middle of the day, and there's a crap ton of people around, but now we are out of sight from the public area. He waits for us and tells us to go ahead of him. The three other girls start giggling and walking up the stairs. He's behind them and then me. I just say, stop, don't go up there, we are leaving now. And this guy freaks out on me and is trying to block the girls from coming down the stairs. I push him and yell, run. They all realize how stupid we are being and rush down the stairs. We ran in a panic with this guy running after us, yelling, no, don't run away. I was gonna give you a prize, don't wreck this for me. I couldn't believe how dumb we were, and I told the girls as much. We swore we wouldn't tell any of the family what we had done. I have no clue what the prize was waiting for us at the top of those dirty stairs. And personally, I really don't care. I realized in that moment how naive I was, and to listen to my intuition, which has protected me many, many times throughout my life. What a bunch of idiots we were. I had something happen to me in Nassau, Bahamas. My mom and I were waiting for a bus one night outside of our hotel on my 17th birthday. What we didn't realize is that we had missed all of the buses that day and were basically waiting for nothing. We didn't want to take a cab because the cab drivers kept trying to rip us off. But anyways, while waiting for the bus we thought was coming, a local guy pulled up, maybe 30 years old, and he asks if we need a ride. Right before we could say anything, another car with a local lady pulled up in front of that guy's car. She rolled down her window and told us to never take a ride with a stranger, as it was very dangerous. After that, she drove off. Now, we were going to reject the man's offer for a ride anyways, but this definitely made it official. We walked back to the guy's car to politely decline, and right as we did, he started screaming and cursing at us. Then I looked over in the passenger seat through the window, and there sat a police baton. I grabbed my mom's hand and we ran back towards the hotel, which was luckily right in front of the bus stop. The guy left tire marks on the road as he sped off. Just goes to show that you need to be careful of how you get around in foreign places. I spent about 3 years backpacking around the world and definitely came back with some pretty good stories. Here's a kind of interesting one. After a big night out in Brussels, I started walking back to my hostel or hotel. I was staying in the worst part of the city, so things were already a bit sketchy since it was probably around 3 a.m. As I came into the neighborhood I was staying in, I passed a small bar with muffled music coming out of the door. I couldn't see what the scene looked like, but thought, hey, why not? As soon as I walked in, I realized that I might have just made a big mistake. It turns out that this was the Congo bar. Now, I'm a 6'2" blonde guy who doesn't typically feel small in a room, but I felt tiny. There were about 40 guys, no women, all from the DRC, and these were some big boys. Immediately when I walk in, a guy grabs me, slams a glass in my hand, and fills it from his beer bottle. I think that these guys were just thinking that I was either crazy or had some big cojones. Anywho, we start slamming them back when I notice a huge guy on the other end of the bar staring at me like he wants to eat my children. We make eye contact, and he just starts screaming at me in Congolese. Immediately, everyone focuses on this one-sided exchange, and the bar quickly splits down the middle. The guys who were giving me beers, there were about 8 to 10 of them, start screaming back at this guy, who's now been joined by his buddies. So little 22-year-old me is sitting there with 20 to 30 giant Central African dudes who are just screaming at each other on this 20-foot by 30-foot bar. Not a word of which I can understand. The only thing I know for sure is that I'm the topic of the conversation. Finally, the guy who started screaming at me left and things mellowed out. But for a while there, I really didn't know how things were gonna turn out. This happened a few years ago when I was around 17 years old. I just finished my first semester in college, and I was homesick and was very much excited to go home. I'm going to a university about 4 to 5 hours away from my hometown. My hometown is an island. To go home, I need to ride a bus from the city to a port for about 2 hours and ride a ferry boat for about another 2 hours. I got to the bus terminal early and was the first passenger on the bus. I sat near the back on a window seat. About 15 minutes later, a man around his 40s asked if he could sit beside me. Around this time, a lot of passengers has filled in the seats already, so I didn't really think much about him choosing to sit beside me, so I said yes. I don't think this data is important, but he was bald, his face and body kind of similar to Mr. Clean. A few minutes later, he started to chat with me and asked me if I was alone. I started to get a weird feeling, but I kept replying to be polite. He also asked how old I was and where I was going, and other personal questions. I kept my replies short, so he would take the hint, and fortunately he did. After this, a fruit vendor went up, and he bought some grapes, relevant for later. Then the bus started to run. About an hour into the bus ride, my mom called me to tell me that she was not sure if my dad could pick me up from the port because she was at a meeting, and she was not sure when it will end. She does not drive, and my dad picks her up. When the call ended, the guy started talking to me again and asked who it was. It was foolish of me, but I answered that it was my mom. He asked why my mom called, and I replied why. He smiled and said, "So that means you're going to..." name of place. "I'm going there too for a vacation. Let's just go together." I don't know why, but I just didn't react or anything. I was getting scared at that point. But what would I do? If I get off the bus, what if he will just follow me? I just decided that it was safer to just remain calm. The bus is full of people, so if he does anything to me, I will just scream. A little later, he started eating the grapes that he bought, and he offered me some. I declined because I actually don't like grapes, but he said, "Just take it. You saw me buy at a vendor, right? Don't worry, it's safe." I got really creeped out at this comment, because what is he implying? I declined again, but he kept insisting for me to get some, and would nudge me with his elbow, so I just accepted it so he would stop talking to me. We arrived at the port and he still followed me. After I got my ticket, I ran away and hid at the women's bathroom. There are a lot of people, so I know he won't follow me there. While I was there, I got a call from my mother saying that her meeting ended and they could pick me up at the port. I was relieved. I should have told her about the man, but I didn't want her to worry, so I didn't really say anything. When I went out, the man was already gone. I boarded the ferry and prayed that he won't see me, but unluckily he did see me and sat beside me. I froze. I didn't know what to do. He continued talking about how he wants me to tour him around the island. He also said that he doesn't know what to ride, to go to the town center, so he asked if I could go with him. I stayed silent and just nodded. I didn't want him to be angry, because I was afraid he would do something to me. I just hoped that I would immediately see our car when the ferry would arrive at the island, so I could part ways with him immediately. He continued talking to me and even asked me for my number, saying that he needs to have it so that he can contact me, if so that we could tour together. I gave him my number, but I changed a 3 to an 8. He then proceeded to dial that number, but it didn't ring. The number was invalid. He looked at me and asked if I gave him a wrong number. There was a hint of anger in his eyes, and he said that I should review the number that I gave him. I was shaking at this point, and was actually glad that I changed just one number, so I pointed out that I must have typed an 8 instead of a 3. He laughed and told me I thought you betrayed me. How could you give a wrong number to a friend? After the longest 2 hours of my life, the ferry is finally about to dock. I could actually see our car parked near the exit of the port. When we arrived, I hurriedly went down, and the man still followed me. He asked me where we would get a ride to the town. I motioned to where the terminal for the transportations are, and I went the other way to our car. He asked me where I was going, and I told him that my parents came to pick me up. I could see that my dad was waiting outside the car. The guy gave me an angry look and said, "But I thought they will not pick you up." I just shrugged and continued walking. I went to our car and gave my dad a hug. He asked who that man was, and I told him that I will tell him later. My mom was in the car, so I didn't want her to worry. When we got home and I told my dad what happened, he was angry at the man. He told me to just stay home for a few days. He also went with me when I had to go out. A few days later, the man called me, but I didn't answer. He called me about 3 times and he texted me. We could have had a lot of fun. I blocked his number after that and never saw him again, and I hope I never will. I was a 22-year-old female, and I had always wanted to travel on my own, so I saved up to do 3 months of backpacking around Europe. My first night away, I was in a hostel in Burgess. In the adjoining bar, I met a guy who seemed lovely. We chatted for a while. He bought me a drink and offered to show me around the city the next day. I accepted. I am now 28 and I've been on many solo trips, and I cringe at my naivety in this situation. It got late, and I said I was going to my hostel, which required going outside then back into a building next door to use a key fob. He walked outside with me, and as I said goodnight, he leant in to kiss me. So I stepped away and asked him what he was doing. He then leaned his hand against the door and said, "Can I come inside with you?" At this point, my heart was hammering. In hindsight, I should have yelled for someone, but instead I pushed his arm to one side and quickly tapped my key to go in. I turned to look as I walked up the stairs, and he was watching me the whole time. I'm lucky he didn't force his way in after me, but it definitely taught me to be wary of friendly locals from then on. I've been browsing this sub for quite some time and thought that I would share a story of me and my friend traveling abroad that could have gone horribly wrong. This event occurred in the summer of 2018. My best friend, a 21-year-old female, and I, also a 21-year-old female, had just graduated college and planned a post-grad trip to the Dominican Republic. We stayed 1 week at a beautiful resort by the beach. Unfortunately, we would encounter many strange individuals during our stay. This story, however, takes place in the first afternoon after we arrived. Earlier that day, as we were getting ready for the beach, we were talking about how much we wished we had some weed. We were pretty heavy smokers at the time and thought that smoking would make the whole trip 10 times better. Fast forward a couple hours, we're on the beach having a good time, playing music, taking pictures, playing in the water, etc., when all of a sudden some guy comes up to us. He seems friendly and harmless at first. He tells us how great we look and offers to take a photo of the two of us together on our phones. We were very excited about this and agreed. After he took the picture, he kept commenting on our appearance and stupidly just thought that he was being nice, gassing us up, and we didn't get any weird vibes. Then the guy asked us if we like weed. My friend immediately says yes, and he says he knows where we can get some good stuff, just a little ways down the beach. He said he could take us. My friend agrees and we start walking with him. This whole time I'm not paying attention, and I thought he asked us if we like movies, not weed. I asked her why we're going to go buy movies, and she looks at me like I'm an idiot and says weed. We're buying weed. At that moment, we both realized we left our bags and wallets at the beach by our chairs and didn't have any money or our phones. We told the guy this. Yeah, I know, we're stupid. And he told us no problem. At this point, we've been walking a little while and had passed most of the resorts in the area. We started entering into a more local part of the beach. At this point, I get nervous because there's probably a dozen men all staring at us hard. Of course, all we had on us were swimsuits, which didn't help. Eventually, this guy leads us to some small beach shop and takes us to a back room. We go inside. He locks the door behind him. In this room was a single desk, 2 chairs, and wall-to-wall cigars. There was also another man in this room sitting at the desk with a gun tucked in his pants. At this point, me and my friend are both very nervous and scared. He tells us to sit down and we do because we're terrified. The guy we met at the beach tells Gun Guy that we're going to buy some weed. The guy at his desk is friendly-ish and says no problem. He asks how much and we tell him. We mention again that we left our money at the resort and maybe we should go back and get it and come back later. He says no, it's okay. His guy will go back with us and collect the money. He said that we can take it now, but only if we do him a favor. Nervously, we ask him what the favor is because we just want to get out of there as soon as possible. He says he'll give us the weed and roll it for us if we show him something. We quickly say no and try to laugh it off. However, he continues to ask, and I start to get nervous that he won't let us leave unless we do what he says. I quickly tell him that we have boyfriends, so we can't do that, but we can give him a hug if he'd like. Him and his guy then look at each other and bust out laughing. My friend and I are really scared at this point. He starts talking about how good it is, how it's Jamaican, and he's giving us a deal that we need to do something for him. We offer to pay more, but refuse to do anything for him. Then he starts asking us in Spanish, hoping to trick us into agreeing. My friend, who did not speak Spanish, just answers yes, hoping to appease him so we could leave. Luckily, I understand some Spanish and quickly said no. We insisted that we need to get back and we'd pay extra, but we're not showing him anything and he needs to stop asking. The man gets annoyed and says something to his guy. He rolls the weed and tells us to get out. We were so relieved to leave this room. Luckily for us, the guy takes us back to our resort, collects the money and leaves. We start laughing about how crazy that was and how it could have gone way worse, but at least we got weed and we're alive. We were very dumb and naive. Then, out of nowhere, a staff member at the resort comes up to us angry and asks where we have been and who that man was. We looked at him shocked because we didn't know him, and he was practically scolding us like children. He told us these men are not allowed at the resort and that they come to the beach hoping to lure tourists. They're very dangerous and that we need to stay away. We lie and say that we don't know what he's talking about and that we'd appreciate the concern, but we're okay. We didn't want him to know that we had weed on us because it's illegal and not allowed at the resort. He finally leaves us alone, but for the rest of the trip, wherever we went, that man was always lurking in the background. I couldn't tell if he was suspicious of us or if he called himself watching out for us. Anyways, that was just one of many creepy experiences I've had while abroad. If you like this story, let me know. Maybe I'll tell you about the time that we were almost kidnapped in Prague by our Uber driver. The whole thing unfolded today. Cops were involved. I almost had a panic attack. It was a whole mess. So I'm on a trip backpacking around Europe with my brother, currently in Paris. We're staying at this hostel and we're in a 10-bunk bedroom. There was this one guy in the room who was immediately super weird. Almost right away, like as soon as we got settled, he starts talking to us about flying to Libya. He's all, us, Libya, fly tomorrow. And me and my brother are just like, nah, dude. He keeps saying it. We keep saying no. And he's getting progressively more assertive about it. As me and my brother are going around doing sightseeing and stuff, I keep seeing this dude around. When we're at the hostel, he kept following us to the dining hall, out onto the terrace, and I'm getting more creeped out. My brother, ever the non-assertive soul he is, just laughs it off like the dude is joking. This goes on for 2 days. Well, this morning, we were going out to get breakfast, and I forgot my phone back in the room. So I told my brother to just go ahead and I ran back to get it. I go in the room and the dude is sitting there. There's no one else in the room, and I honestly contemplated just leaving it. But I didn't trust it alone in the room, so I planned to just grab it quickly. That morning, he was still going on about Libya, and was essentially bending over our beds going on about it, despite me repeatedly telling him to stop talking to us. I go in and grab my phone, when he suddenly just yells, "Libya, now, now, we go now." I'm very scared, since at this point we are the only ones in the room, and I just say, "Screw off, dude," and I go to leave, when he blocks the door and grabs my shoulder, still going on about going to the airport and flying to Libya. I shove past him and run away to where my brother and I were going to breakfast. I decided that we were going to switch rooms because this dude was officially creep level 100. We make it back to the hostel, and before we make it to the front desk, we went outside for a smoke and he shows up. I almost yell at him to leave us alone, and he flat out says no. I go to the front desk and explain that this dude has been harassing us and we wanted to change rooms. I mention what went down in the room, and before I know it, the cops were called and I was giving a statement. As they were sorting it out, there were a couple things that jumped out at me. 1. This guy didn't pay in advance. Normally, when you're staying in a hostel, you pay the full amount up front, or if you're staying a while, you pay weekly. He was paying by the day. 2. He had several pieces of ID in his wallet, none of which matched his description. Apparently, Paris had been having a problem with human trafficking. This guy was escorted out of the hostel by police. He was banned from staying there ever again. Me and my brother switched rooms and were given vouchers for free dinners for the rest of our stay here. And now, I'm terrified to go out by myself. I swear, if me and that guy had been alone in a more secluded place that didn't have cameras everywhere, I could have been shipped off to Libya. So, creepy guy from the Paris hostel, let's not meet again. I was around 15 or 16 years old at the time. I'm currently 18. And my mom, dad, and I were on a family trip to New York City. It was a really good trip at first. We visited the Statue of Liberty, Madison Square Garden, Times Square, etc. And for the most part, it was a normal vacation. But towards the end of our trip was when everything went to crap. It was our last day there, and we were trying to get back to the airport, so we decided to take an Uber. A couple minutes passed and a gray Civic pulls up to the sidewalk that we were on. I remember noticing that he had a Lyft and Uber stickers on his car, in multiple places almost excessively. It kind of felt like he was trying to prove that he was our Uber. It was just a small thing, but looking back, I really wish that I took more concern about how sus this guy really was. Moving on. We were running late, so I'm guessing that my dad didn't really pay attention to the license plate, because this guy was definitely not an Uber driver. He was a lanky African-American man wearing clothes akin to rags, and looked like he was drugged out. but at the time, nothing seemed off to us. Again, we were running late, and what happened was the least of our expectations. The ride was normal until we got to the airport. We all expected him to get off the highway and let us off, but he didn't. Instead, he casually continued down the highway, past where we wanted to be dropped off. This was when my dad noticed that the man didn't have a meter or his phone set up with the Uber GPS open. We were starting to get worried, and my dad asked him in a stern voice, "Excuse me, where's your meter?" The man stayed silent. Flustered, he asked once more, this time yelling, "Where is your meter?" Again, no reply. But at this point, the man started dashing down the highway, weaving past other cars and driving very dangerously. We were all panicking. My dad was screaming at him to let us off. My mother was crying and praying with her rosary clutched firmly in her fist, and I was in shock. I froze up. I couldn't even cry or scream as much as I so desperately wanted to. I was completely immobilized. This continued for a while, driving down an unfamiliar road to God knows where, with the car only getting faster and faster. I started having those classic end-of-road type thoughts, like holy crap, this might be it, and there's nothing I can do about it. But luckily we were saved. I don't know if we passed by it, or if someone in a car we passed had called the cops, but we soon heard sirens blaring behind us, and we were being tailed at high speed by multiple police cars. One of the cops had a megaphone or something to amplify their voice, and screamed out for the man to pull over. Obviously, he put up a fight, and the police had to actually cut him off for him to finally stop. The police helped us out of the car and got all of our things from the trunk while putting blankets around us and telling us that it was going to be okay and that we were safe. At this moment, I felt the biggest wave of relief wash over me that I have ever felt in my life. Don't get me wrong, it still messed me and my family up pretty bad, and I was still left pretty traumatized, but I was at least glad that me and my family were alive and safe. The police gave us a ride back to the airport, and everything went as planned from that point on. But holy crap, am I glad that I never had to find out where this guy was taking us, and what he was planning to do with us. Just thinking about it still gives me goosebumps. I guess the moral of this story is to always check the license plate before going on an Uber or Lyft. That feature on the app that tells you what it is exists for a good reason. Last week, my boyfriend, a 20-year-old male, and I, a 19-year-old female, took a trip to Mexico for our anniversary on the 20th. Let it be known that we speak a fair amount of Spanish, enough to get us around comfortably. We started in Playa and moved to Cancun to hopefully get better beaches without as much seaweed. We took taxis many places, including from Playa to Cancun, an hour drive, and had no issues. On our anniversary, Thursday the 20th, we went out and did normal daytime in Mexico things. We then went home and got ready for an evening out. We decided to go to a place called Toro Rojo because they are known for their super nachos, and boy, do I love nachos. So we take off walking because according to the maps, it's not far. We walk and walk and walk for 45 minutes. And I check the time on my Google Maps, and it says it'll be another hour walk, or a 5-minute drive. It was a pretty major highway that we were walking on. We decide to hail a taxi, because honestly I was in a rush for super nachos and daiquiris. The taxi pulls over to the side and we hop in. We tell him Toro Rojo, and he says he doesn't know where that is. So we hand him my phone with Google Maps pulled up. To get there, you needed to go straight and take a U-turn, and it would then be on the left. So he starts driving down this highway, and I'm watching over his shoulder. We're getting closer to the U-turn and he does not slow down. We pass the U-turn. I assume, okay, maybe he missed it. I've done it myself 1,000 times before. He keeps driving. He passes another U-turn, and another, and I start to worry. I take my boyfriend's phone and type. He keeps missing the U-turns. Tell him it's the other way. In Spanish, my boyfriend tells him to go the other way to get to the restaurant. The guy keeps driving faster and faster, 40 kilometers over the speed limit now, and says, "Mi inglés es no bien." My English is not good. He keeps driving and driving, passing U-turn after U-turn. I start panicking. It's hard to breathe. When I hear my boyfriend tell the guy, "Aquí es bien," here is good. He keeps driving. My boyfriend yells this time, "Aquí es bien." The driver finally slows down and I leap out of the car. The man demands $30, which my boyfriend gave him happily, and we took off sprinting the other direction. We look on maps and he took us 9 miles outside of the city, so we are now 12 miles from our hotel. There's nothing around us except blackness and trees. It's 11 p.m. Thankfully, I could call my mom and dad, and they talked to us while we walked. We were walking, trying to get ourselves to a hotel, so we could pull cash out. The taxi driver took most of our cash, and get an executive taxi. It was an hour walk to the nearest hotel. We were walking, and suddenly, this red Mini Cooper starts slowly following behind us. They roll their window down and drive next to us, but don't say anything. At this point, we were both so on edge. My boyfriend smacks the side of the car and screams, "Chupa mi pájaro," suck my you-know-what. They finally speed off and away from us. Soon after that, we are coming up on 2 stray dogs, and my boyfriend mentioned, "What if they aren't friendly?" and grabbed 2 rocks just in case. This broke my heart, as I am pre-vet, but, safety first. These dogs ended up being amazing, and only wanting pets. So, we pet them a bit and keep walking. Maybe 20 feet after these dogs, this red truck drives up next to us and asks taxi. It was an unmarked car, not a taxi. We tell him no and wave him on. He does not start to drive away, and suddenly these dogs come running and jumping at the car, barking so meanly. We run the other way because I trust a dog's intuition. We finally made it back to the hotel and got back to our hotel safely. But frankly, I'm scared to go to Mexico ever again. Back when I was 16, I had a rough time with my father and his girlfriend for about a year or so. Long story that isn't really related to this. But I was trying to mend my relationship with my father, because before all that, I had always been a daddy's girl. So when I was offered to go on vacation with them along with my siblings and step-siblings, I said yes. After having thought about it long and hard for a month. We went to Turkey. We would be living at an all-inclusive resort that was aimed at Scandinavians, so a lot of people we could talk to. The first few days were perfectly fun. I was swimming in the sea and the pools at the resort. Only creepy thing there was a waiter who grabbed my hand and slipped me a napkin with a message of meeting up with him. He spent the next couple of days lurking around me every time we would go to eat until my father saw how uncomfortable I was and told him to buzz off. Yay, Dad. But one day, my stepmother decided that we should take a girl day of shopping, which meant my sister, my 2 stepsisters, her, and myself. I didn't really like the idea, but I decided to come along anyways. So off we went to the nearest bazaar. We spent about an hour there until we got to a small place that looked really sketchy, but they seemed to have some clothes that my stepsisters wanted to look at. So we went inside. I remember there were 3 men there, 2 older ones and then a young one in the beginning of his 20s. He called himself Oscar. I remember because that's the name of my dog. We were seated and they brought out Turkish tea and such to make us feel at home, while we were looking at dresses and the like that they wanted us to try on. In the end, I was pressured into trying one on and went to the dressing room. While I was there, Oscar came and asked if all was well. Thinking that it was just good customer service, I answered that I was fine. He might have understood something because he slipped into the dressing room, and before I could do anything, he had me cornered with his hands on my cheeks and leaned in to kiss me. My body froze, despite my brain telling me to scream and punch him. It took me half a minute before I managed to pull back and tell him to stop. I pushed him out and changed faster than I ever have. Luckily, I was wearing a dress as well, so it was easy enough. Once I got out, I asked my sister if we could leave, whispering what had happened. She nodded and had to force my stepmother to get her butt in gear. She was enjoying all the compliments. Once out of there, my stepmother was scolding me for making a scene. My sister told her what had happened because I was a sobbing mess. Stepmother's reaction? She grabbed my arm hard and said, "Do not tell your father," before she let go and marched out of there. I didn't feel like leaving the room the rest of the vacation, and stupid as I was, I didn't want to make my father angry, so I didn't tell him. To this day, he still doesn't know what happened, and to this day, my stepmother is still angry at me for ruining that vacation. So Oscar, from that creepy shop, I hope you get what you deserved, but let's never meet again. So a few years ago, my boyfriend's dad's family decided to get together and all chip in to rent a condo in Ontario and get together. There was a big, extended family over there that his dad never saw, because he only really got along with one of his 3 sisters. My boyfriend's mom had talked him into going though, and they let me tag along, because I'd been around long enough that they liked me and trusted me. I can't remember where everyone else had gone. I think it was to the beach for what was probably like the 3rd time that day. It was just me and my boyfriend at the condo, because we were kind of sick of the beach and just wanted to do nothing in the shade for a while. We were sitting outside, looking over the water and just kind of talking about life. I had just finished reading the Harry Potter series, so we were just kind of talking about that for a bit, when this woman comes out of the brush beside the condo. Just for an idea, this condo was about an acre of land maybe, and it was kind of out of the middle of nowhere. The front of the condo was probably 70 feet from a dirt road that no one traveled down really, and there were some dense trees and brush and whatnot that surrounded 3 sides of it. This woman comes out of the wooded area, and I immediately knew that something wasn't right. She was limping, and she only had on 1 sandal, and frankly she looked like crap. She was pale, and her face was gaunt. She was really, really pretty, but she just looked exhausted. The thing that immediately caught my attention was her baby, who she was holding pretty tightly in her arms as she started coming towards us. I didn't really know what to do, but my boyfriend immediately got up and walked over to make sure that she was okay. I couldn't help but think of all these awful things that might happen after spending so many hours hearing these horror stories on Reddit. I was just terrified that she'd do something. My boy is a lot more trusting than I am though, and he's always had the instinct of what's the problem and how can I help. He's never assumed the bad in anybody. So this woman is just sobbing by the time she gets to the porch of the condo, and she looks like she's just been through a war zone. She's shaking and hyperventilating and crying, and she's telling us that basically her boyfriend has been a drunk for a while, and he's been getting worse and worse, and he's been an overall abusive guy. He'd get angry whenever she was focused on the baby instead of him, and part of what made him angry and set him off was that it wasn't his kid, so he kinda didn't care about the baby at all. She told us how this time in particular he was drunk, and she was driving him home, with the baby in the back seat, and he grabbed the baby's booster seat and tore it out of the car, and threw it out of the window while they were driving. She got the baby out of the seat or something. I don't remember how, because as she's telling us about how he started hitting her before she took the baby and ran, We hear this yelling, and we turn and see this angry dude walking up to the condo, and she starts losing it. Drunk and angry, this guy followed her to our condo and was starting to come up to us. He was trying to act like he wasn't angry. He was doing a, "Oh, you guys found her. Thank you so much. Baby, let's go home" kind of thing. But he was slurring his speech and not doing a good job of hiding how angry he really was. My boyfriend has always been a pacifist. Honestly, he's even kind of a pushover. He's really non-confrontational and tries to find a way to talk stuff out and come to an agreement before doing anything. But before I could even say anything, he's across the yard and approaching this guy. As much of a pacifist as he is, he's also huge. He's built like a football player. He's 6'3", and at the time he was 230 pounds. I've known my boyfriend since we were 10. At the time we were 20, and we'd been dating for just over a year. I knew him better than anyone. He's never done anything like this before, but he goes up to the guy and goes, "Not another step, dude," and he's shaking as he says it. The guy tries to walk around my boyfriend and goes, "No, it's okay. I'm just gonna take her home." And my boyfriend steps in front of him and shakes his head. "You're drunk," he said, "so I'm gonna pretend like maybe you didn't get what I just said. Don't come any closer." At this point, the guy stops trying to pretend, and he says something like, "You don't know what's going on. That's my girlfriend. I'm gonna take her home." And he tries rounding my boyfriend again, and one more time my boyfriend blocks him and says, "Stop." I've never heard this tone in his voice before or since. It was scary. It wasn't him. The guy tried one more time before my boyfriend finally put his hand on his chest and pushed him back a bit, keeping his hand on the guy's chest. "I'm telling you right now, you're not going anywhere near that girl and her child, so turn around and walk away." This guy was about 5'6", maybe 5'7", so when he looked up to threaten my boyfriend, he had looked like a kid. The guy finally looks up at my boyfriend, and he says something that I couldn't hear. My boyfriend said something back, and then the guy stared at him for a moment, like he was deciding whether or not to do anything. My boyfriend finally pushed him away, and the guy stumbled back, and then started pointing at me and the girl as he was trying to say something. And then he started to walk away. I didn't learn till the next day, but the guy had told my boyfriend that he had a gun and that he was coming back, and that he'd kill him if we stopped him again. My boyfriend's response to that changes depending on who's telling the story. Originally, he told me that he told the guy that he'd feed him his own teeth, which made me laugh because he's such a dork and he got that from a movie. And ever since then, the line he tells everyone is, "I'll be waiting." The woman was sobbing, the baby was sobbing, and I was shaking because even though he didn't throw any punches or anything, I could tell that he was ready to hurt this guy if anything else had happened. We called the police, and they didn't really do much of anything outside of make sure that everyone was breathing and take the girl to her sister's place. We didn't really hear much from her after, but I know my boyfriend sent her an email once or twice, and she's married now to someone else and had another kid last time they talked. It was a really nice trip, despite that one part. I was on an overnight ferry and got up in the middle of the night to use the toilet. They were like communal, if you know. So I had to go out of my room and a few doors down a hallway. When I was done and stepped back out to the hallway, a man turned the corner and me, being a young kid, got some bad vibes from that dude. So I didn't walk back to my room until I knew that he wouldn't know which room I was in. I started walking faster and faster away, and he just followed me. At some point I started running and finally turned a corner back to where my room was. I looked back and could hear that he was far behind and out of sight, so I quickly got into my room and locked the door. I just sat with my back to the door in complete silence and heard him running past the door. I did not sleep much that night. I was around 12 years old. We were fishing in the middle of a lake when my cousin hooked me in the forehead with a triple hook barbed spoon lure, feathers, and pork rind for bait. My uncle detached most of the lure, but couldn't get the hook out, so I had to go to the ER in a tiny town. I came in with my hand over the hook. The triage nurse asked what was wrong. I removed my hand and she just said, "Oh." After I sat in the waiting room for a while, a resident came out, said I was making the other patients uneasy, and put a sheet over my head. Once they took me back and a doctor examined me, he asked for a scalpel blade. I thought he was going to cut my forehead open to get at the hook, but he just needed to remove the pork rind. He numbed me up and pulled the hook out rather aggressively. I had to get a tetanus booster. I have a needle phobia, and I had to get stuck twice that day. My mom and aunt are still laughing about it more than 30 years later. A few years ago, I went on vacation with a friend to a resort in a popular spring break area. Although I was the typical spring breaker age, I avoided people my own age and instead hung out at the adult pool bar. My friend and I frequented this bar every day and became friendly with the bartender. But the bartender became a little too friendly with me and would occasionally flirt and blow kisses at me. I took these gestures with a grain of salt and saw that it was a way to get more business. But his gestures went too far at one point. The pool bar had a public restroom right next to it, so one day after having a drink or two, I excused myself from my friend to use the restroom. While going to the bathroom, I heard the door open and someone enter a stall. I didn't think much of it until I went out to wash my hands. The restroom was really dark, which made this situation even scarier. While washing my hands, I heard one of the stalls open behind me, and I looked up into the mirror only to see the bartender come out of one of the stalls. Besides him, I was the only one in the bathroom. At this point, every siren in my head was going off, but I was in so much shock that this man would follow me into a woman's restroom that I didn't know what to do. At this point, he tried to talk to me, but I dodged him and ran out of the bathroom. My friend later laughed it off, but I never went back to that bar. I should have reported his behavior to the resort, but I was in so much shock that I didn't. When I was younger, each summer and almost every New Year, my family would pack the car and go on a trip to visit family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination the next morning. So around 2 a.m. we crossed into Mexico, and that's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside with our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the cacti. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still have a few more to drive, and I remember sleeping, but still being semi-conscious of what was going on around me, because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in a car. So when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "Miguel, that car behind us. It's been behind us since we left Laredo." My dad peeked at the car, shrugged off my mother's tension. A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Reynosa or another city, and he left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mom kept a wary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper aware of the car, and entertained ourselves with watching the car through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. We got tired pretty quick. "He's getting closer," my mother noted, and we turned to watch as the car inched closer and closer to ours. "He's too close, Miguel." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, and on a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, with another few hours until daylight. It was downright crazy. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove, and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense we had ever experienced. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its blinding headlights against our rear once more, like he knew that he was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of the periods that the car had pulled away that my mom spotted a police car up ahead, parked on the side of the road, and she didn't miss a beat. "Pull over, right in front of the police. Pull over now, Miguel." And he did, and the car kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The policeman came over and asked us what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us and taunted us. The policeman took her claims seriously and told us of how people were victimized and had their cars stolen on these empty highways by thugs and criminals. And then he offered to drive behind us for a while to make us feel safe. We drove with the police cruiser behind us, relieved, until about 10 minutes later when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting. Like several other posts on this subreddit, this happened to me when I was a kid, 10 to be exact. I grew up in a military family and lived on the Middle East for a significant portion of my life. Because of this, we frequently traveled to different countries because of the low cost and proximity. On this particular vacation, we flew into Cairo, Egypt, the kidnapping capital of the world at that point in time, for a long weekend. We only lived like 2 to 3 hours away. It was late at night, and we were staying at the Marriott Hotel, which had a taxi and shuttle service that was supposed to pick us up. For some reason, our driver never showed, so we were forced to find a regular taxi to take us there, which took forever to find that late at night. We finally found one that was offering us a pretty good deal. They don't run by meters, instead they just give flat rates that they choose, and headed towards the hotel. Out of nowhere, another taxi basically T-bones us in the middle of the road, causing us to stop. There aren't really defined roads in a lot of Arab places, so it isn't really that surprising that we got hit. In Arab nature, the two drivers get out of their cars, each yelling that it was the other's fault, and looking like they were going to throw hands. Eventually, they got back into their respective taxis and parted ways. My family and I were completely taken aback. We had been in Egypt for less than 2 hours and have already had quite the adventure. We finally got to the hotel, exhausted as it must have been 3 a.m. by this point. Our driver helped us get all of our bags and we got settled, and told us that he felt so bad about the car accident that he offered to pick us up the next morning and take us to the Great Pyramids, which was on our agenda, for a super cheap rate. My parents agreed and decided on a time for him to come, though I can't remember when. Flash forward to the next morning. Everyone is ready for the day, excited to see how crazy it was going to be. Our driver was outside waiting for us, leaning against the car like someone in an old movie, right when he said he'd be there. I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl that had a deep tan at the time, and being in Egypt, that was a rare sight. When the driver saw me in the daylight, he gave me the creepiest, most unsettling look that sent chills down my spine, even as a 10-year-old. I knew that something wasn't right with him. Nonetheless, we got in his taxi and headed towards the pyramids. He continued to try and talk to me and joke around with me the whole ride, something that I found to be extremely creepy and bold since both of my parents were in the car. We get super close, and there is an entrance that people can go through and walk the long distance to the pyramids, and there's an entrance that taxis can go through. You have to pay to see them. Strange but true. Our driver keeps making jokes about my blonde hair and blue eyes, and bringing up that he could get me into the pyramids for free, so my parents wouldn't have to pay the extra ticket price. We laughed it off and my parents paid him, said thank you, and began to exit the taxi. I don't remember how it happened, but at some point after I got out of the car he did too, and directed me towards his trunk. I was confused and thought we had forgotten something, so I stayed behind as my parents walked towards the gate to get whatever I thought we had left. The driver pops the trunk, but there wasn't anything in it. He grabbed my arm and put a hand on my back, trying to push me into the trunk, and said, "I'm getting you in for free," over and over again as I resisted. Naturally, I freaked out and screamed out to my mom and dad at the top of my lungs, terrified. When they heard me and noticed that I wasn't behind them, they started sprinting back to the car. When the driver heard me scream, he immediately let go of me, closed the trunk, and drove away, just as my parents started to run to me. I was crying my eyes out, terrified out of my mind, knowing that an Arab taxi driver tried to put me in his trunk and drove away the second I screamed for help. It's scary to think what could have happened to me had he been stronger and more prepared, or faster. He's the reason that I'm still terrified of taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, and any car service of that nature. So, Egyptian taxi driver, let's never meet again. When I was around 15, a family friend offered to take me and my mom to Seabreeze after he won tickets at work. It was awesome because he spent from open to close riding all of the fun rides, like the Quantum Loop with me while my mom relaxed, bought me overly priced drinks and food, and even bought me silly souvenirs. It was without a doubt one of the top 5 trips to an amusement park for me. Well, like 2 weeks later, we learned from his sister he was arrested for a string of robberies, along with murdering an elderly woman whose house who robbed a little while before he took us on the trip. Nobody could believe it until he pleaded guilty and was sentenced. He seemed like such a great guy, loved his family, gave money to charities, took his friends on expensive trips, which now we all know how he could afford it on a cashier's salary. All in all, a seemingly great guy. It just shows that even the most normal-seeming people can sometimes have vomit-inducing skeletons. This story is so weird that I almost pushed it out of my mind, but my friend reminded me of it last night, and now I'm creeped out all over again. I was around 15 or 16 years old, and I was on vacation at Walt Disney World sometime during the summer. My family has the vacation club membership, so we go a few times a year and live close by anyway. We were staying in the vacation club villas, which is a separate building from the main hotel. I brought 2 of my friends, Savannah and Victoria, and we got bored at around 2 a.m., so we went down to the gym. It's open 24 hours. We weren't even going to work out, just take mirror selfies and mess around with the exercise balls. There's a desk for the spa portion of the gym, or maybe it's a sauna, I don't really remember. But since it was so late, there was no employees, so we were messing around behind the desk and found a notebook. I'm not sure why. I was super annoying at the time, but I decided to write my Twitter and Instagram handles, and so did Savannah. Looking back, I'm pretty sure that we could get in trouble since guests aren't supposed to screw around with the desk. I didn't think much of it and we left the gym. And the next morning we checked out of the hotel. On the drive back home I get a Twitter notification, and it's from a diaper fetish account. The creepy thing is this account was active for a while, and had disgusting pictures of grown men in diapers and other disturbing pictures of children. So does Savannah. And we both sat there looking at each other like, what the heck? The account tweeted at us saying something like, "I know who you are and what you've done, and your vacation will end abruptly." They tweeted some more creepy stuff like telling us to watch our backs, but I knew that it was clearly because we left our names on the notepad. I didn't write back. Then I noticed a new follower, and it was my name, but the username was similar to the diaper account. The account started tweeting my address, my phone number, and random pictures of me from deep within my social media. They do the same thing with Savannah's name, and at this point we're both really scared. I get a text from a random number. I'm assuming they used a texting app, saying what they were watching us and knew more than we thought. They even started texting me about my boyfriend at the time and asked me some really messed up questions about him. I told them to screw off and blocked it. I didn't get any more texts, but the Twitter account continued to tweet about me and random details that I knew they had to dig deep to find. I blocked them on that too, and put all my accounts on private. I never got any more messages, but the Twitter accounts are still up to this day. So, to the Disney employee with a diaper fetish, please stay far away from me. In the mid-90s, my parents took my older brother and me on vacation to Cancun, Mexico, when we were teenagers. Me 13, my brother 18. My brother and I shared a room, and he was old enough to go out to the bars, leaving me alone in the room to watch movies and be bored out of my mind. My parents wanted to hang out with us the whole time, but we were too cool and tried to distance ourselves from them as much as possible. I was mature for my age, had previously had some underage drinks with friends, and felt that I was old and cool enough to go to the downtown parts of Cancun. When I asked my brother if I could join him, he laughed at me and told my parents, so I was bitter that I was stuck back in my room, or worse, forced to hang out with my folks. The third or fourth day into our vacation, I was sitting at one of the hotel bars, nursing a Shirley Temple and feeling sorry for myself. A woman, nicely dressed in her mid to late 20s, sat down next to me and we started chatting. I don't remember the details of what we talked about. I just remember her being really interested in what I had to say, and she made me feel like I was really mature for my age, what 13-year-old me really craved. We made arrangements to meet at the resort bar the next day to hang out some more. The next day, we met in the resort lounge at lunchtime and hung out. She listened to my stories about how BS it was that I couldn't go out drinking, and sympathizing, she offered to get me alcoholic drinks. 13-year-old me wanted screwdrivers. After 3 to 4 drinks, I was getting pretty drunk, and this was when she asked me if I wanted to go back to her room to hang out and watch a movie. Drunk 13-year-old me thought this was a great idea, as I was going to get more booze, and this cool 20-something chick wanted to hang out with me, and thought that I was super cool. Just as we were leaving the lounge, my mom appears. She was meeting my dad at the pool. Mom doesn't know what's going on, thinks I'm heading to my hotel room. Drunk me proudly introduces my new friend to my mom, telling her that we're going back to the woman's room to watch a movie. My mom's face goes from "Hi, how's it going?" to "Get your butt up to your room right now." My mom tells my new friend that she has no business inviting 13-year-olds back to her room, and that she is not to talk to me again or my mom will call the cops. At that moment, I was so angry with my mom, but she had that "don't mess with me" look, that I knew that I had to keep my mouth shut. The next day, I was heading out to the pool and saw that woman sitting at the bar with 2 men in their late 50s, who I can only describe as menacingly scary. She pointed at me, and one of the men glared while the other winked at me. It sent shivers down my spine. This happened about half a year ago, but finding this subreddit reminded me. So I get a message on a dating site from a girl. Not my type, but I checked the message out. Hey, you're super hot. Want to come over to my hotel room? I was flattered, but definitely was not interested. However, she might be a good person, so I messaged her back. Not really looking for that, but I'm down to chat. Her. No. I really, want something else. I'm on vacation and I'm at hotel near my house. Me. Once again, I'm very sorry, but I'm not interested. Where are you from, and why choose here to vacation to? Her. I live in the same town, but I'm at a hotel wanting to do stuff. Come over. At this point, I was sketched out. Why rent a hotel room when you live here? It's a smaller city. So I did the smart thing. I blocked her. I sent a message beforehand saying goodbye, and I hope she finds someone that is interested. Fast forward 30 minutes. She made a second account and sent me this. I'm serious. I really want you to come over. Here's something to persuade you. A link to a picture that was a picture of her, naked in bed. So, I block her again. Not even 15 minutes went by, and there is another account and message from her. At this point, I think I'm getting trolled. My friends could easily pull this off. I wanted to call their bluff, so I created a new Kik account, gave my info, and told her to go on video. I was going to catch my friends. Well, it was her, and she quickly went into doing things trying to persuade me. I deleted the Kik and avoided it. Deleted my dating account. Was completely sketched out. About 2 months later, I reactivated it one lonely night. About a day later, I get a message from her saying that she saw me riding my bike downtown a few weeks ago. She described what I was wearing. I had enough. I told her that I could take this to the police for harassment. I didn't know if I had a good case, but I wanted to scare her away. It worked. I haven't heard a peep since. And I've never been more grateful to think with my brain instead of my other head. This is about last year, just at the start of October 2015. My dad thought that it was a good idea to take the family out for a little fresh air. I live in a small town, so nothing big happens except for the finish of Idiotrod. I'm just going to skip to the event that happened in Las Vegas. I'm 17 now, and I was 17 then, so seeing a new big city was always fun and very exciting. We had a reservation for this fancy hotel and casino called the Mirage. Fancy to me, at least. I was pretty bored in our hotel room, so I decided to pass time looking out the window staring at this vague volcano. I decided to go for a walk by myself and told my dad that I was going by this water show or something. While I was walking on the strip, I was passing Caesar's Palace, and there was a walkway where most people weren't walking though. Just a select random way most wouldn't take. This may not be so believable, but this random man walked up to me and asked if I had any money to lend. He was a bit darker than me and had a cap on, and was wearing a Jimi Hendrix t-shirt and was wearing cargo shorts. I responded nicely and respectfully. He approved, and we went our ways separately. After about a few minutes of sightseeing and looking around, I noticed the same guy slowly following me. As I continued into a pharmacy and bought a Rockstar and some kind of candy bar, can't remember. I noticed the same guy, but this time more of a distance away. So I decided to make my way quickly back to my hotel. After passing this water show that starts every 15 minutes or so, I did a check around. Pretty self-explanatory. I didn't notice him, so I kept walking onto the Mirage, which is now in sight. Walking distance to the front door of the Mirage, I hear, "Hey man," coming from behind me. As there were many people around, I just went on thinking it was to someone else. After a short walk through the weird stores, and in there I hear, "Hey yo dude," in the same voice. So I turn around and notice that he had asked me for some money earlier. I kind of felt bad lying to him, but I brushed it off because I didn't know him at all. As he was coming closer, I thought to myself, crap, too late to book it. So I went on with the very unnerving conversation. After some moderately friendly chat, he then asked again if I had some money to lend. So I pretty much thought that he saw me purchase my drink and candy bar, leading to the fact that I have change. After avoiding light questions like got any change and can I have some money, I came in clutch and said that my dad was calling me. After I got off the phone with my dad, I finally found out the guy's name, Jerry. I knew it wasn't his real name because he hesitated for a good 4 to 5 seconds. I shook his hand and proceeded to the elevator as fast walkingly as I could, as I can hear him jogging right behind me. I saw some ladies walking in a small group, kind of like how fighter jets fly. Best pilot in the middle, others slowly left and right, and I used my okay agility to sweep by and not get yelled at and managed to ditch him, and he started to run after me, but I made it to the elevator just in time, made it to my room and slept it off. So, scary dude, let us never, ever meet again. We were in Hamburg, Germany. On our last day, we went to the parking place where our car was, and driving out of there, a van had parked blocking the exit. Looking behind the van was like 8 guys with masks and guns about to do a full-on robbery, so we just floor it and drive around the van. Very weird experience. I went to Paris for the Japan Expo 10 years ago with my parents and a friend of mine. The last Saturday, she had a huge pain in her belly, was lightheaded, and a few other symptoms. We tried to go to the hospital, but the ER was closed. Tried like 4 clinics with ERs, but they were all closed too. The only one that was open had the on-duty doctor only arriving in the middle of the afternoon, when it was 10 a.m. Receptionist tried to call her until she got a hold of her because my friend was visibly in pain. The doctor made my friend explain what was going on the phone and sent us to another clinic to get some scans and tests. Turns out, one of her kidneys had shut down and she needed immediate medical attention. I was on my first road trip through Europe. Me and a friend were traveling extremely cheap for a number of reasons. We had terrible bank numbers, but we needed a getaway for a while. So badly, so whatever. We camped and slept in the car for most of the trip. We didn't have significant trouble. Maybe some homeless people or drunk bums forcing us out or landowners asking us to leave. But all good. Until one night in Romania, near Craiova, we set a tarmac in what seemed to be like a reasonably secluded stretch of woods and left the car 50 meters away. We woke up in the night because we heard some noises, and a random group of people were literally tearing the car apart by smashing it. We shouted and they began to chase us for a bit and then left, but we ran. We fled as fast as we could, slashed tires, reported it to the police, and sorted out the papers to scrap my buddy's car. They didn't even steal anything, just damaged the car to a point where it was a lost cause. We took buses and hitchhiked back home. I enjoyed Romania a lot, and I'll go back if I can, but I won't set foot in that city ever again. Crazy folks, I tell ya.